Gela Kasla. Gela Kasla. Gela Kasdakula Lokulakle. Gela Kasla Gigigame. Gela Kasla Ninaxola. Ninokard. Nuko Amna Gedzi. Gayuchten Lach Komoks. So before we start, I'd like to welcome you here all today onto this beautiful unceded traditional Komoks territory, as well as beautiful big house whose name happens to be Kumogwe. Someone said a little bit earlier that it's really nice when our house is full, because you know that something important is happening. And I think something important is happening.
As president of the Community Justice Center, I am so proud of our community and the response that we have had to this. This year, over 100 representatives of local governments, community agencies, ethno-cultural organizations, faith communities, and the broader cultural community will step forward to publicly sign this declaration. And it's a declaration of our community's commitment to diversity and acceptance, and our desire to stand up and bring an end to racism, homo and transphobia, and hate activity of any kind. It's up to us to demand change and to do our part to live our beliefs, showing compassion and kindness for others.
And so we would like to acknowledge the signatories as among our most special guests this evening, for making this possible, for declaring that in the Komoks Valley, we do not accept these behaviors as representative of our values. We are striving to build a warmly inclusive community, affirming of the diversity of our residents and visitors. This protocol is a sign that we are deeply committed to continuing this work as long as it takes to extinguish such activity from our neighborhoods, our cities, our regions, and our province.
My granny, who went to residential school from the time she was 4 until she was 16, used to always say to me, "A true leader is someone big enough to hold within themselves all the differing opinions." This is the reality of community. This is the reality of people. We have different ways of being in the world. It is a wonderful thing when we can uncover our curiosity and ask questions and be full of wonder and opportunity rather than fear. So thank you for your dedication to helping people open doors, for helping people who are fearful. When people are discriminated against, the world becomes an unsafe place. It is so important that we open our arms and we find a way to support them in feeling safe again.
My history with racism is quite extensive. I was born in Arkansas. My great-grandmother was born into slavery. I chopped and picked cotton. Need I continue? Needless to say, I've become somewhat of an expert at surviving racism, and I believe that there are others here who are as well-versed as I am. I discovered the option of moving to Canada in 1970 and jumped at the chance to be in this liberal heartland of the world. At last, I would be delivered. I believed from the scourge of racism once and for all. I found work in social services and was introduced to people who assured me that there's no racism in Canada. It didn't take long before I began to learn of the plight of Indigenous people, the long struggle to survive and thrive in this culture. My heart sank. After retiring from 30 years of counseling in various forms, I agreed to be president of the CJC Board of Directors with its principles of community involvement and addressing directly and effectively criminal behavior with a restorative justice philosophy. Since the signing, there have been a plethora of community-inspired activities that have been aimed at furthering community education on the subject of opposing acts of racism and homophobia and hate. These events have taken a variety of forms and engaged different communities and groups throughout the Valley. We are here at this witnessing ceremony to recognize and affirm the amendments which are specially designed to challenge the incidents occurring on social media. This ceremony has also provided an opportunity for many new groups, organizations, governments to become signatories. In addition to the 43 signatories of 2009, this evening we'll see over an additional 100 signatories joining together in this work that still needs to be done to confront racism, hatred, and homophobia. There are those who say that all we have to do is to confront these issues is to increase our community empathy. However, as we note, in some of the world politics, empathy can be interpreted to mean those who look like me or who belong to my group. This is proven unworkable and sometimes even dangerous. Instead, we focus on community cooperation and cohesion. We instead of I. It is this community focus that is encouraged by both the CJC and this protocol. It is in the spirit of coming together to make things right, which is the practice of Nikisla, that we are reminded to practice in our dealings with racism, hatred, and trans homophobia. I will conclude my little talk with a poem. I guess it's a poem. It's called One Man Awake. One man awake awakens another, who in turns awakened his next door brother. A third man awake awakens the town, and it turns the whole place upside down. One man awake with dawn in his eyes multiplies. It is my dream and hope this evening that we will move the Komoks Valley closer to the realization of this true spirit of Nikisla. And I thank you.
Before I was 10, there was a year when my First Nations friends went off to the residential school, and it was the same year that all my Japanese friends were taken away to we did not know where. They got on a train and we did not know where they were going. I'm extremely proud to be part of an organization dedicated to removing hate, homophobia, and all that is attendant upon the many hatreds humans can manage to create and must fight. Chief Everson is the grandson of the late Komoks chief, Andy Frank, and the great-grandson of Quagulith chief, Mountain Wilson. Building stronger relationships with the Komoks Valley and strengthening the cultural and economic development of the Komoks First Nation members are two of the big issues that Chief Robert Everson has devoted his energies toward. This evening, he will share with us his thoughts on moving forward by enhancing and strengthening the social relationships between and amongst all our communities.
So when we were at home earlier today, and as many of you that know me know that I'm not very good at writing speeches, and I usually just shoot from the hip, like an old gunslinger from the movies. I talked to my kids and my family and my Komoks family at home earlier, and I thought it would be fitting to have a red dress, and they thought it would be really fitting if I actually wore the red dress. I'm afraid that I don't have the legs for it, and I don't think I'd be able to pull it off, but something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know Ramona and Anne and my wife Lee last year with Walking with Our Sisters were instrumental in bringing that here. And again, as everyone's seen the installation out front, bringing recognition to something that's so important to all of us. And the red dress, although it's a symbol of racism and hatred, it's also a symbol of hope. Because what it does is it triggers emotion in all of us. It triggers thoughts, and it triggers questions. What can I do? What can you do? What can our leaders do? What can anyone do? And most importantly, why isn't anyone doing something? We all know that just recently our federal government has finally initiated that inquiry into missing and murdered women, which, you know, we hold our hands up to them, and we hope that throughout the process there is some learning. And if there isn't closure, then at least some of those important questions finally get asked at a high level. I'm privileged to be speaking here tonight. I feel a little bit out of my depth, but I'll share a little bit of insight into my world, and I'll touch on all the subjects. I grew up in a very loving family. My parents had many foster children growing up. I have brothers and sisters, adopted brothers and sisters. Many children came through our homes as we were growing up, all the way from little to when we finally left the house. So I think that that's one of those things that allows you to accept people for who they are, because there are so many different people that we experience throughout our lives, and it's so important to be able to accept and not to push away or be negative with a lot of people. My son played a lot of high-level sports, and throughout his life and my daughter's lives, you know, we have relatives that are gay, and we're very close to them and very accepting, and it's not even, when you accept people for who they are, it's not even a thing. You don't even know it's there. So they grew up knowing our relatives and being very close to them. So when my son was playing high-level sports, junior hockey, there was this young fella on his team that the whole team thought that maybe this young fella was gay, and they were all a little bit, what's that word? Oh, right, homophobic about this young man. And of course, my son growing up with loving gay relatives and knowing who he was, it didn't bother him. And so of course this young fella, no one wanted to go in the shower when he was in there, but my son's like, whatever, I don't care. So he went in there and, had a shower, whatever. But when he was leaving, this young fella slapped him on the butt, and he thought that was awkward. It didn't upset him. He just thought, wow, that's from anyone getting out of the shower. That shouldn't happen. It's so important to be accepting of who you are and the people around you. My late father-in-law, we had dinner with a gay relative of mine and a really good friend, really good people. And they came over for dinner. I think we probably had spaghetti because that's what we had a lot back then. And my father-in-law, after they had left, he thought, wow, those are really nice. Those young men were really, really nice. And then my wife said, Dad, you realize that those two men are gay. And he just couldn't believe it because he passed away when he was about 87. That was about 12, 13 years ago. But he came from an era of don't ask, don't tell, and a lot of hiding, and a lot of guilt and shame, and a lot of, no one talked about that back then. So he was very shocked, and he came to love these men, and he was very good friends with them, and very accepting, and he didn't really care. Touching on racism, and now we'll get into the politics, and I apologize to any politicians in the room, particularly federal or provincial. I've been an elected chief for about 4 years. I'm also a hereditary chief, but being in an elected position, such as the chief of the Komoks First Nation, we get to experience a lot of systemic breakdown. We get to meet with politicians at the provincial and federal level quite often. And unfortunately, through this 4 years, one of the things that I'm getting used to, I don't accept, but I'm getting used to, is being told no, we can't do that. Everyone here has learned about residential schools. I have many, many relatives that went to residential school. I have seen the effects of residential schools. I've seen the effects of the children of residential school survivors, the children's children of residential school survivors, the children's children's children of residential school survivors. And it does cascade, and every generation, there's a lot of learned pain, there's a lot of learned racism, there's a lot of learned social programming that comes with residential school and with the type of systemic racism that First Nations people have been faced with since first contact and continue to be faced with. In the Komoks Valley, because we live in such a beautiful place, most of those tenures are gone. And everyone here is well aware of the ENN land grant that happened in the 1800s. So the governments, both federal and provincial, decided with Dunsmuir that we needed a railway up and down the island. So they created the Esquimalt-Nanaimo Railway. And it was basically a land grab. They gave Dunsmuir and his partners 2 million acres of land and paid them on top of that to actually put the railway in. Many of our First Nations from the Komoks Valley all the way to Victoria are still fighting the injustices of the ENN land grant. Throughout British Columbia, First Nations across the province are able to get tenures, so that means they can go into the forest, they get a license to cut crown land forestry, they can generate revenue for their people that way, they can create jobs. They also get tenures in aquaculture, but with the ENN land grant, all of that land is private. So nations such as Komoks, Snuneymuxw, all the nations going down the east coast of the island have not been afforded that same right as nations outside of this area because all the land was given away. This is probably at the heart of what I get to fight every day. In my opinion, it's a systemic racist system because it precludes First Nations such as Komoks and others from entering into those businesses. It doesn't allow us to expand, and the governments are just so stubborn with regards to allowing First Nations to make their own money. The United Nations Declaration says that, you know, First Nations people all over the world, they have rights to land, they have rights to resources, and if those have been taken away or squandered, then the government's on the hook. They gotta compensate them fairly for what they have done. You can see that originally the 4 colonial nations that opposed it were, of course, New Zealand, Australia, United States, and Canada, because they were settled by the colonial settlers, and the rules that they put in place when they first landed here were set up to allow them to take over and do what they wanted to, and to force First Nations into a system of poverty. One of the things about Canada is we're not very good at jumping up and down and yelling and waving a flag and being real grumpy about things when we're angry. We're very subtle about it. Racism is definitely alive and well in our country. We're really good at hiding it, though. If we want to make change, it starts with the people in the room. It starts with the people on the ground and the everyday people. We're the ones that have to be the change. We're the ones that have to talk to our friends and our relatives and make them understand, provide them with information in a loving, meaningful way that's inclusive. For some people, it does take a while, especially for some of the older generation or people that have suffered trauma, and I get that. But the responsibility doesn't lie with our government coming up with a program to tell you what to do. It starts with us talking to our spouses, our husbands, our wives, our children, our parents, our grandparents, our grandchildren, and letting them know that it's okay. It's okay to have a gay friend. It's okay to have a black friend or an Asian friend. Heck, it's even okay to have a First Nations friend, I heard. It's not about us changing everyone. It starts with yourself, but it's about talking to the people close to you, and it's about the little changes. We got a lot of work to do, and I believe that the Komoks Valley is a very tolerant community, but we're an exception. Let's face it. There's not very many communities that are like the Komoks Valley. Just like we're a tolerant community, it doesn't resolve any of us of being better and trying harder. I know that I want to be better, and I'm sure that every person in here wants to be better and do more. I know we can't do everything, but let's make an impact on just 1 or 2 people and focus on that and allow that change to happen. Have a good evening. Gela kasla.
I want to acknowledge and thank Bruce and the community justice people for commissioning me to write a piece for this tonight. When I found out that the Komoks First Nations was an integral part of what we were doing here, I wanted to find some words and some terms that had particular meaning. So Nikisla, coming together to make things right, and Nalaatsi, new beginnings, those really jumped out at me, and that became the cornerstone of the piece. And once I had those words, the rest was easy to write.